Ever felt like the secrets to growing up aren't all wrapped up in your childhood? Get ready for a thought-provoking conversation with Megan Ness, who's turning the idea of maturity on its head. We're diving into why admitting you don't have it all figured out is the real power move. Stick around and find out why growing up emotionally is not just for kids. Hi, friends. It's Natalie. I'm very excited about today's episode because I sat down with Megan Ness, who is an author, coach, therapist, and speaker. She's just released a new book called Never Too Late: Growing Up Before You Grow Old. Megan is all about guiding people on their journey to emotional maturity. And trust me, it's conversation you don't want to miss. We dove into topics like vulnerability, the importance of community, and breaking free from generational patterns. Megan has such a fantastic perspective on things like the butterfly effect in our lives and how just a small awareness can create massive change. Whether you're curious about emotional growth or maybe you just want to feel understood at a deeper level, this is the episode for you. Oh, and before you dive in, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. And if you like what you hear, would you take just 30 seconds to leave a review? Because that's what helps this podcast grow. You can also head over to my website, NatalieTysdal.com, for more tips and to sign up for my newsletter. All right, let's get started today with therapist and author Megan Ness. Enjoy the show. Megan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So, we get midlife, we raise children, we have all these things. We think we're grown-ups, and yet we all have areas that we can still grow up.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Is that why you wrote your new book?
Yes. Yeah. The title is actually kind of in that era. It's called Never Too Late: Growing Up Before You Grow Old. And I didn't mean that as an ageist way of thinking. I actually, the concept of the book is that it's never too late to look at things, to look at pieces that we might have missed throughout our life, different areas that we may not have been modeled how to develop in. And so I'm hoping to help fill in some of those missing pieces for people.
I often felt like as a young mom and young working in corporate America, like I felt so grown up. I felt so like, wow, I'm really doing this. I'm an adult. And then as my kids went off to college, it's almost like, I don't know, maybe this happens to a lot of people in midlife. You get hit with this brick of like, whoa, I have so far to go.
Sure.
There's so much that I don't know.
For sure.
And a lot of that, and I know as a therapist for you, I would say a majority of that is emotional work from my past. And I find with the women I work with, that same thing. So talk to me a little bit about how, I know this is like, you can't talk about the whole book, but how you grow up emotionally and how we can start working on that. Are you ready to launch a side gig, maybe a small project or business? Need a professional logo that won't break the bank? Looka is the AI-powered logo maker that's perfect for entrepreneurs and freelancers. With Looka, you can create a stunning, unique logo in minutes without breaking the bank. Just answer a few simple questions about your brand and watch as Looka generates hundreds of custom logo options. It's like having a team of professional designers at your fingertips. So why settle for ordinary when you can have extraordinary? Visit NatalieTysdal.com/favorites and start creating the logo your side gig or your small project deserves.
Well, actually, what you just talked about is one of the key aspects I talk about, which is humility. And I think naturally we do grow in humility as we get older. My husband and I joke that we would have hated to meet each other at 20 because we had all the answers, and as we're, I'm almost 50 and he's already 50. We're like, oh my goodness, just like you said, I really don't know as much, whether it's emotional or other things. So I just think that's a humble place to be in. And it's really a beautiful place to be in, to realize there is more room to grow. Like there is more room to develop all these different places. And as far as how to do it, that's really the goal of the book, is just to show people that it doesn't take much. Actually, just to turn your awareness towards something automatically creates change. I talk about in the book this concept called the butterfly effect that says when a butterfly flaps its wings, the air molecules around the wings are impacted, and then the next air molecules and the next air molecules. And they've proven it scientifically that actually the butterflies flapping their wings can affect weather patterns across the world. And it's the same in our own lives. If we just take a moment to stop and look at a pattern and pay attention to it, even that attention can start to create tiny little shifts in our lives that can have massive impact.
Well, you mentioned vulnerability, and I think it's a problem actually in our world. And I work with high schoolers, like learning to be vulnerable, to be honest about where you're coming from, that you don't have to pretend to be good at everything. What's your take on that as a therapist?
I think it's one of our greatest strengths. As Brene Brown so wonderfully showed us over the past decade, but to really own our story, to own our reality, which is our amazingness and our brokenness all in the same package, to own it fully is one of the most brave things we can do, but it's also one of the most least anxious things we can do. It creates a ton of anxiety for us to keep trying to show up and pretend to be something we're not. And often it blocks us from being the beautiful being we're called to be out in the world because we're trying to be something other than we actually are.
But is there a piece of that in vulnerability that you don't have to tell everybody your darkest secrets, because that's really hard and can expose you to things too. So where's that balance of being vulnerable and being honest versus dredging up really hard things, either with your family or
Right.
things like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. In the book, I talk about the concept of safe people, which is the people you're going to tell your deepest, darkest secrets to are the people that have earned the right for that. They've been there. They've shown themselves trustworthy. They've shown that they're not going to share that with someone else. And that might only be one person right now. And I say in the book, sometimes it's only God at a time, or the divine, however you phrase that for yourself. And then there's a person who shows up and you sort of attempt it with them. Or maybe you know it first with a person and then you can do it more with God and with other people. So I do think it's sometimes incremental, but we have to do it only with those places that are really safe. And it still feels risky, even if you have a safe person. To tell my husband something that I've never told him before, it's always going to feel risky, but he's proven over time that he's worthy of that.
And that safe place, maybe a best friend. Well, what about the thought of, and you hear this more with men, the midlife crisis? You hear that more. I don't even know really what that is. Is it when we all of a sudden discover, like, oh wait, I'm actually going to die one day. I better hurry up and get all these things in.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I actually have a really interesting take on that. So I don't know exactly who I learned this from, but it's probably an amalgam of several teachers. But men tend to have a path of ascension at the beginning of their lives. They're told to make something of themselves, right? Attain a career, do all these things. And women typically have a pattern of descension. Like we lose our name, we lose our body and for a time to give to a baby. We end up surrendering in a lot of ways naturally earlier on in life than men do. And so a lot of times that midlife crisis for a man is sort of a shocker, like, oh my gosh, like I might not have status and power. Do I have value? And for the woman, it actually tends to be the opposite, where she's often looking around and saying, like, I have all this to offer, but I don't know if the world even knows that I exist, or that, where this can play into. So it looks a little different. I think that's a stereotypical way to understand it, but I think often those can be pretty true for men and women. Either way, I think midlife is, as Richard Rohr would say, we've built the container, whatever this container is, and we're really looking for like what's going into the container. That's sort of a more masculine way to look at it, but that's often how we think of midlife.
Yeah, yeah. But our families have a lot to do, of course, with who we are, how we act, the generational patterns. I know
Absolutely.
Therapists will say have a lot to do. I'm sure you do too. But can you break free from that, especially if there is trauma or difficult things that have happened in your family?
Absolutely. You can break free from it. I say that not only knowing my own life and my own journey, but countless clients that I've helped to do that same work. And I would say not only can you do it, but I would actually say that is our calling. That is our job, to be more and more free to be who we're created to be. And part of that is just taking off. I think of it sometimes as like taking off clothes that don't fit anymore. And I think this is where the fear can come in. People will say, well, if I don't think the way that my family thinks anymore, or if I don't believe the way my family believes about God, or if I take on this different way of communicating than I always grew up with, is that going to distance me from my family? It's a big fear. And certainly that can happen. But I often find that when people move more into their authentic selves, if there actually is love and grace and, like that safety going on in the family system, they actually find a lot of acceptance and warmth around that.
What about when it's not warm and accepting and it's a fight?
Well, that happens too. I've actually had that experience as well in different aspects of my story. I would say then you have to look at your deepest question. am I really committed in this life to becoming what I was designed to be? And is that more important than keeping everything nice all the time? Or am I really more committed to keeping peace, even if that means suppressing really authentic and genuine parts of myself that really need to show up? And I think this is actually part of the midlife question, right? Is where are my loyalties, and are they to, a greater unfolding of your life, or are they to sort of staying small and safe and inside a more tribal idea of your family?
Yeah. Well, I that happens, I think, to a lot of people of just feeling like I have to do this because I was told I have to do that. What other examples of that have you worked with clients where they've had to figure out how to break free of those generational patterns?
Yeah. I had a female client who came in, and she was very like single mom, in real estate, could really manage all these different pieces, but she was having trouble really connecting vulnerably with people. And what we found as we did work together is that she had taken on this very macho sort of way of holding herself because she had two brothers, and she always saw her dad paying so much attention to her brothers that she sort of made this subconscious, silent agreement with herself that she would show up more like that. She would show up in this really tough way like she had it. But what we saw over time is that when she stayed in that pattern, it actually kept care and comfort and connection from her. And she was always sort of disconnected, even from her dad, even in her family system. And the more she could put that down and just be her authentic self, the more her parents actually came closer to want to help, to want to partner with her in life. And then she didn't have to hold on to that persona anymore.
Yeah. Well, you told me just before we started that you have different categories of emotional growth, and you outline those. Did I say that right? Is that what it is in the book? And you outlined some of those. Give me some idea of what those look like.
Yeah. Well, the first one starts with awareness, awareness of yourself and awareness of other. And I break that down into being aware of your body. Like right now, sitting in this chair, am I aware that, maybe I'm a little nervous? So do I feel my heart racing a bit? Or am I sitting funny in the chair because I didn't put the proper pillows in it? Or just literally aware of my body in a moment. And most of us are pretty shut down in our bodies. We're not taught that that's a good thing to pay attention to. So often a lot of emotional growth, even with my clients, not pertaining to my book, I often am bringing them first into their bodies. Like, how are they feeling in this moment? Can they start to notice patterns of feeling certain ways when they get anxious in a conversation, or when they are scared, or whatever they're feeling, or excited? So that kind of awareness, and then leading into awareness of their thoughts. Like, are they aware of narratives that run through their mind? And once we become aware of these narratives, they're kind of shocking sometimes. We don't really realize that they can be passed down from either our families or just groups that we've been involved in. Like, I know I've had a lot of narratives around self-shame of my body image. And until I could really be aware of them, it was very thoughtless. It was sort of subconscious. But when I became aware that I was actually looking at the mirror and saying things like, ugh, you shouldn't look like that, or you look too big, then I couldn't change anything. But as soon as I could become aware of those narratives, then I could say, oh man, that's such a shaming voice. I don't want to talk to myself that way. I would never talk that way to my daughter or a friend of mine, so can I start to soften that voice for myself or notice it when it's happening? So that's awareness. That's just one element. Curiosity is another one. I think curiosity is a huge piece of emotional maturity. And in our society today, it's pretty shut down. I mean, we are not really that curious about the other side, whoever that is, whether we're talking politically or religiously, different schools of thought. And so I just think the ability to really try to understand where someone's coming from and not think of them as bad or evil or wrong before you really try to understand them is a skill set all of us really could use some growth in.
Yeah, I love that one. Someone said it to me years ago that in any situation, try to understand before being understood.
Yes.
And that has come back to me so many times. And like, I just want to say something. I just want to, no, I really just want to I think maybe that's how journalism worked for me, is I really just want to understand. I want to get it.
Yeah.
I want to know where they're coming from. That's a good one.
Yeah.
What else?
A willingness to need people. That's kind of that's my final, the 10th one. It's kind of the hardest one because you really have to have willingness for vulnerability and humility and curiosity and all these things that I name along the way to realize like, oh, it's not a weakness to need people in my life. It's not a weakness to really need someone to confide in about this, or to get empathy from in this situation, or to validate how I'm feeling, right? Or just reflect back to me. I think in our Western culture, we're often taught that it's you need to take care of yourself, and, don't cry over spilt milk and those sort of things. But really, that when we do the research and look at emotional, like you have IQ, right? The intellect quotient, but you have the emotional quotient, the EQ. And what we know is that people who have really high EQ absolutely surround themselves with a tribe of people that they need and depend on. And we haven't seen that in recent years as a strength.
Maybe that's generational too, though. I, as a young mom, when I was working, I'm like, I can do this. I can do it all on my own. I don't need people. And now later in my life with grown kids, like, no, I need people. But it took me a lot. It took me a lot to get there. Is that a generational Wonder Woman complex kind of thing? Did I just make something up?
Well, no,
A
I think
term?
there probably is a generational element to it, but you could also look at different cultures across time and realize that we've probably done a lot of, ebbing and flowing in and out of this needing of people. I think while we were probably in the US very independent and needing all these things, I would guarantee you there were European countries that were not like that. They were living in tighter knit communities where they were really needing each other. I think it's probably different across time and all cultures as far as when we've been in that strength. But I think as a unit, we're definitely needing to lean more in that direction so that we don't continue down this path of becoming so just isolated, even with all this technology and even with all this ability to travel, that we end up so isolated in our own emotional experience of life.
And what I'm hearing you say is not being needy and always needing someone else to do something, but having a community that supports each other in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was talking to a friend the other day, and we were joking. I was offering to get up and get her water. She was at my house. And she said, well, why would I ask you to do that when I could do it for myself? And we just had to laugh at that, because that is the Western mantra, right? If you can do it for yourself, you should. But often it's nice to be taken care of. I mean, again, we're not talking about, I think we always think worst case scenario, like, oh my goodness, what does that mean? You'll just sit lazy and ask people to serve you. But we're not talking about that. We're just talking about a place where you allow people to show up for you. You allow people to help you, even if you could do it yourself in some moments, that you actually receive. And I actually think that's a huge strength. It's shown to be a huge strength in the psychological field, but we have been told that's a weakness, that we should be doing everything ourselves. But actually, if you think in a survival mechanism, right? Like a wolf, we talk about a lone wolf, right? That is not a strong unit. A pack of wolves is a strong unit. And we know that just from nature, that like these people that herd animals and animals that stay together, they're actually stronger against all the elements, whether it be weather or predators or anything like that. And when we bring that into the human condition, it's actually very similar. And when we can ground ourselves in a community and in a herd that's got our back, so we can sort of rest sometimes and sometimes be the front runner, then that's really a better way to live.
Well, it's kind of a gift of receiving too, like for your friend and for all of us to be like, it feels good to give. So allowing someone the ability to give to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's true. I think we know that for ourselves, and we believe that to be true for ourselves. Like, I know I love to give my neighbor some of our casserole that we made last week, but I don't think of it often when it comes to me. We just get nervous or we get anxious that we're being needy. I think it's a lot of cultural messages that we are looking to overcome.
Yeah, we've got a lot of them.
Yeah. Just a few.
We do. So understanding them is so important. Well, I'm really excited for this book for you. I think it's a great topic, and obviously comes from a place of a lot of research and a lot of working with clients in your background. But who do you aim the book towards? I mean, who is the person who needs this the most?
I would say the person who needs this the most is the person who is curious, right? They're actually willing to take a step to say, maybe I am missing a couple key places in my development, right? As I say in the book, we've all grown to adult size in our bodies, right? But sometimes like this emotional part just hasn't quite caught up, and it's not a shameful thing. It's actually, we're all in this together. The reason I could write the book is because it's me too, so it's not like I'm coming as an expert to tell all of you people how to grow up, but it's more that I'm in the walk and in this flow of life with everyone, that I want to be the best version of myself. I don't want to be running unconscious patterns, either as a parent or as a wife or as a friend. I really want to be self-aware, and I want to be the most loving I can be to the people in my life. And so if that's you, if you're thinking, yeah, I really would love to be freed up, I find some really quirky things that I do and I don't understand them, then this would be a great place to start.
Yeah. Do you ever stop though? I mean, you midlife, especially for women, we need this emotional work, but does it continue throughout a person's life?
It does. But as I say in the book, it's kind of like when we think of growth spurts physically with kids, when they're in a growth spurt and they're not sleeping well and they're eating more and all that sort of stuff. It is a period of time. So I think there are times of growth and then there's times of stasis where you're good and it feels really good. And then something else might come up and you might say, okay, I'm ready for, another dive into maybe an area I haven't seen before. Definitely not constant growth. I think that would be exhausting. And even as a therapist, I don't want to do that for myself. But certainly I think that when you and I meet people that are older, that we're like, oh, I want to be like them. I just want to hold life like them. Those people are people that are constantly willing to revise, right? They're constantly willing to reassess how they're coming in their marriage, how they're coming towards their kids. And that it's so beautiful to watch. It's just that we haven't believed we could get there. And now I think, reading books like this and doing this kind of work really can help us to be the same.
I mean, I encourage people to always learn. I mean, we never stop learning.
Never.
And sometimes you read the book and you go, yeah, I got that. That's good. I'm good on that. But then you keep working through other things and your awareness starts to become so much more apparent of what you do need.
Absolutely. Yeah. I do.
Well, where can people find you and get the book?
Well, you can find me at meganhartness.com, heart as in the deer, heart, HART. And the book is on Amazon, and you can find it in Kindle version, paperback, and hardback.
Well, best of luck with it. I'm excited for you, and I really appreciate your time here for the podcast.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you for joining the Natalie Tysdal Podcast. You can follow along on Instagram and at natalietysdal.com. Subscribe to the show to catch every new episode and leave a review so I can continue to bring you fresh content. See you next week.